Good afternoon, class. Today we'll start with the final chapter, that is Fun with Fabulous Float. Now we have up till now seen simple CSS for changing the color of the font, changing the font family and font size. Then how can we add a certain image and text effects using CSS, and what are the different levels of CSS. In today's class, we'll be dealing with Fun with Fabulous Float. This float is a CSS layout that helps us to design the look and feel of the page. Because basically speaking, what we see HTML is nothing but one element vertically, basically a vertical line of all the elements. They are basically going from left to right and top to bottom. There is no designing, or I cannot I do not decide at which place what element will go. Everything is sequential. So to change that behavior, and especially the behavior that occurs that changes the layout on resizing the browser, needs to be changed. So for that we use the float layout. But before that, there are certain ways by which we used to describe the layouts before CSS and before the float layout came in the CSS. But these old school layout options had their own problems. So when there was no CSS, we used to use frames for giving the layout to the web page. Now frames, as we have already discussed, allowed us to basically divide my web page into different sections. I designed a master web page file which contained only the linking to the different HTML files for the different frames that I divide the master page into. But it was a good enough method for providing a clean layout for the web page, wherein I could decide the layout in the master page, where I basically use the frame tags to divide the page into different frames, and all the coding or the content could go into the different HTML files that were linked to the source attribute of the frame tags. But the problems with the frame were too many, which included the complexity. Yes, obviously it was very complex because you had to keep track of the master page, where all the where the relative positions of each of the web pages or each of the frames were defined, and we also have to basically deal with the different web pages for all the frames. So if my web page had 5 frames, then I had to deal with 5 HTML files and 1 master file, so 6 files in total. The complexity increased, and we were unable to create complex layouts using frames. The second issue was linking issues. The problem with using frames was that because if I use a hyperlink in a frame, the default action is that the hyperlink opens up in that frame itself. But most of the times what I want is that there are 2 frames in my page, and the one frame only contains the links, and on clicking on the link should open in the second frame and not on the frame itself. So my hyperlink tags now required modification so that they could act properly. The target attribute of the anchor tag need to be modified to the second frame and not to open in the frame itself. So there were linking issues while using frame based layouts. The other problem was that the backup of the pages, like on clicking the back button on the browser, we did not know what was right, whether to move to the previous state of the frames or move to the master page itself. So this was a common confusion, that what the user wants on backing up. Does it want me to go to the previous state of the frames, or does it want me to go to the um, master page in its default sense? So the backup nightmares were there, wherein it was not clear that on clicking on the browser back button, in which state should I move. The third thing was ugliness. Although there are now options to hide the frame boundaries and everything, but if we resize the browser window, the frames look really ugly, and the scroll bars also show up. So they are not very attractive and good, an attractive option for giving layout to your web pages. The third problem was that the pages won't show up in the next problem was that the pages won't show up on the search engine, because the master frame contained only the frame tags and no content. The search engines could only basically access the individual pages and not the home page, so the home page would not show up on the search indexes. So for all these reasons, frames are no longer supported in HTML5. HTML5, however, does allow a special type or a limited type of frame called iframe, but we generally prefer not using frames in HTML5. The other option for giving the layout or deciding the positions of the various elements on the web page was to use tables. Uh, we used to put the different elements in the TD tags of the table tag. So providing layout with tables was a normal thing in CSS, in pre-CSS days. So if not frames, the designers preferred using tables. But tables also had their own problems. The first one being complexity. Yes, the table syntax is not that difficult, it's very straightforward, but it becomes very difficult to handle a lot of nested tags, and also tags which use row span and call span attributes to alter the normal behavior of the table cells. Then we have the other drawback, that is content and display merging. Actually the elements and the layout that is provided by the table were not separate. The elements become embedded into the TDs and TRs of the table, so our content basically gets buried inside the complicated mess of table tags, and hence it becomes difficult to move and update them. The third drawback of using tables is that it's an highly inflexible layout mechanism. Say if I'm creating a layout using tables, if I need to change even a single thing, a position of a single element, I want to take it from bottom to top or from left to top, then I have to completely redesign the table, because simply copying, pasting, and removing the elements won't do the thing. It is quite complex and nested tags that we are talking about, so making changes is not that easy. So we use tables for displaying tabular data only in HTML5. We should completely avoid using it for layout, because we have better tools available. The third option that we used before CSS was to use huge images. Now, some of the HTML designers in pre-CSS days used to design the entire web page using tools like Photoshop, and inside the image only there was text and links and everything. You could link parts of the image to another image and so on. But it also has its drawback. The first one being size and shape limitation. The When your page is based on a large image, you're committed to the size and shape of the image of your page. So it will not look good when I'm viewing the web page on a mobile phone or personal digital assistant or tablets. It will not work well. So I do not want web pages that do not open correctly on all different electronic devices. And then second drawback was the content issues. Since the entire web page was an image itself, there was no content involved. That meant that the page won't show up on search engines can't index it, and also it is a problem for people who cannot see, who use screen readers. There would be no text to read out to them. The third drawback is that it is difficult to update. If I have made an error on my page, to modify the error, I need to basically recreate the entire image. I cannot simply edit a piece of text in the HTML code. So, updating or correcting a error in an HTML code is way simpler. You simply change the text, but when we are updating a page which is composed using images, I have to redo the entire image. The fourth problem is the file size issues. Obviously, images have very large size, and hence they will be extremely slow to download. So people with slower access will definitely not access your website, and even people with modern internet facilities would not find your site very attractive, since it would be very slow to load. So they would prefer moving on to a different site. The other option before CSS was to use Flash. Now, Flash animation tool was again by Adobe. Now, this tool basically allowed you support for sound and video integration, but now with HTML5 we do not need Flash for that. We have the sound and video tags there for in HTML5. We do not need Flash for that. Apart from that, it also allowed the possibilities for animation and automatic motion tweening. HTML5 allows us to do that also. So in more or less we have replaced Flash, but in earlier times Flash was a very important development when we did not have the HTML5 still developed, and most of the web browsers are still using Flash, even though now we have, especially for games, okay, even though now we can make games using HTML5, we do not need Flash. So the Flash has its drawbacks too. The certain drawbacks of using Flash is that cost. Yes, Flash is not free of cost, it's not cheap, it's a proprietary software, whereas HTML5 is free. So better use HTML5 than go in for Flash. Other thing is binary encoding. All the text in a Flash web page is stored in the Flash file itself. It's not visible to the browser. So Flash pages don't work in web searches and are not visible to screen readers. The third drawback is that for updating a Flash based page you need a Flash editor installed. So this makes the editing a lot difficult. For updating an HTML page you just need a simple text editor like Notepad. So that's also a tricky thing. You need a specialized editor for editing Flash web pages. The fourth drawback is there is no separation of content. Everything is contained inside the Flash element. So there is no separation of content from the layout. If you want to make change to the content, you have to change the entire Flash application. Then we have the search engine problems. As I told you, code written in Flash is binary encoded, so it is not available on the search engine. The technical issue is that Flash is not integrated directly into the browser, so you have to download something called as a plugin. If you have ever played Flash based games, it asked you to download a Flash plugin so that the game could be played. So the browser does not directly support it. You have to download small applications or plugins to support Flash. The next drawback is that it provided limited mobile access. Flash is mostly not supported in iPhones and iPads, and also on many different other mobile platforms also there is limited support. So it's better not to use Flash. We go in for HTML5. And the last thing is, for not using Flash, that it is no longer necessary to use Flash. We have HTML5, CSS3 and JavaScript. Together these three manage all the shortcomings of Flash and provide you all the features that Flash provides. So it is better to use CSS for giving layout rather than using these proprietary layout options.